There's a small amber jar sitting on my kitchen counter right now. It's been there every November for as long as I can remember. Nothing fancy. A half-pint mason jar, slightly cloudy inside, a slip of paper tucked under the lid band with a date written in pencil. The smell, when you lift that lid, is something between a good kitchen and a very old pharmacy. Sharp and golden at the same time. Warm. Does that smell mean anything to you? That bite of garlic underneath something rich and sweet? Have you ever walked into a kitchen and known, without anyone telling you, that someone in the house was fighting something off? My grandmother kept a jar like this every winter. She never called it medicine. She never called it a remedy either, come to think of it. She called it the jar. It's like there was only one jar in the world and everyone already knew what was in it. Today, I want to show you exactly what was in that jar, where it came from, and why, after 1958, your family probably stopped making it. Because the story of why it disappeared is almost as interesting as the remedy itself. And here's what most people don't know. The year is 1958. That's the year the United States Food and Drug Administration formally approved a compound called dextromethorphan, DXM, as an over-the-counter cough suppressant. You may not know that name, but you know its product. Dextromethorphan is the active ingredient in Robitussin. It's still sitting on the pharmacy shelf right now. Here's how dextromethorphan got there. In the early 1950s, the United States Navy and a number of government research programs were looking for a non-addictive alternative to codeine. Codeine cough syrups had become a serious abuse problem through the 1930s and 1940s. They needed something that suppressed the cough reflex without the habit-forming qualities of an opiate. What they developed was chemically similar to morphine, but without the high. The Food and Drug Administration approved it in 1958. By 1960, it was in dozens of branded products and on the television in every American living room. Before 1958, cough season meant grandmother went to the pantry. After 1958, it meant Dad went to the drugstore. Now, this shift didn't happen because the pharmaceutical product worked better. That's the important thing to understand. It happened because it was new, it was modern, it came in a bottle with a label, and it had an advertising budget. The household manual did not have an advertising budget. The 1938 Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act had already laid the groundwork. That legislation, real law, passed by Congress, signed into effect, created for the first time the legal category of approved and unapproved remedies. It gave the Food and Drug Administration the authority to decide what counted as medicine and what didn't. It was the infrastructure for what came 20 years later. But here's the thing about 1958. The jar didn't stop working. It just stopped being printed in the books. And that's exactly what your great-grandmother would have told you, if anyone had thought to ask. Let me take you back to the man who wrote it down. His name was Alvin Wood Chase. He was born in 1817, and he spent much of his adult life doing something unusual, driving a wagon through Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, stopping at farmhouses, talking to the women who ran them, and writing down everything they told him. Chase was a traveling physician and salesman. He dispensed treatments along his route, but he was also listening. He was collecting. By the time he sat down to compile his notes, he had something extraordinary. A record of what ordinary American households actually did when someone got sick. Not what the university doctors prescribed, what the farm wife reached for at 2 in the morning when her husband couldn't stop coughing. He published it in 1864. The full title was Dr. Chase's Recipes, or Information for Everybody, and it was printed in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Here's what most people don't know about that book. It sold an estimated 4 million copies in the 19th century, second in total American sales, only to the Bible. It went through dozens of editions, was published in English and German, was carried across the prairies with the pioneer families moving west. In some copies, the publicity materials stated that Chase's book had the largest sale of any book printed in America. What Chase documented, for sore throats, was a preparation of honey, alum, and sage tea used as a gargle. He documented vinegar and water preparations for purifying a sick room. He documented multiple winter cough syrups, most of them built on a base of honey and molasses. And here's the thing about Chase. He wasn't inventing any of these, and he was collecting them. From farm wives in Kalamazoo, from German settlers outside Ann Arbor, from a woman in Sandusky who'd learned it from her mother, who'd learned it from her mother before that. Chase was the archivist. The women were the source, and he wasn't alone. 32 years before Chase published his book, a Boston writer named Lydia Maria Child published The American Frugal Housewife, 1832, Boston. Child's book was a guide for ordinary households with modest means, and her chapter on the sick room includes specific mention of garlic and onion preparations for chest complaints and persistent cough. She was writing for the same audience Chase would reach 3 decades later. Women who couldn't afford a doctor and needed to know what worked. And what both of them were drawing from had a name that went back much further. The preparation of honey and vinegar as a medicinal base was called an oxymel, from the Greek words for acid and honey. Hippocrates documented it. It crossed the Atlantic with European settlers. By the time Chase was driving that wagon through Ohio in the 1860s, a garlic honey vinegar preparation wasn't exotic. It wasn't folk magic. It was expected. Every farmhouse pantry had a version of it. This knowledge belonged to ordinary women in ordinary kitchens. It traveled by word of mouth for 200 years before someone finally wrote it down. And then, slowly, it was unwritten. Let me ask you something. When did your family stop keeping a jar like this? Because I can tell you almost exactly when it happened. And why? Picture this for a moment. It's 1952. Your grandfather just bought a television. He's watching it in a living room that didn't exist 10 years ago because the house didn't exist 10 years ago. It's one of the new suburbs going up outside every American city, full of young families and refrigerators and optimism. Penicillin is curing things that used to kill people. America is in love with the laboratory. In that atmosphere, the handwritten recipe card doesn't stand a chance against the printed bottle. The post-World War II pharmaceutical industry consolidated between 1945 and 1960 in a way that had no precedent. Companies that had been manufacturing penicillin and sulfa drugs for the military came back to the domestic market with massive production capacity, distribution networks, and advertising budgets, where the over-the-counter cough and cold category exploded. Robitussin, Vicks, and their competitors didn't just sell products, they sold authority. They sold the idea that medicine was something formulated in a laboratory, not something prepared in a kitchen. And this is the part the cookbooks stopped printing after 1950. Not because the jar stopped working, because nobody was paying to print it anymore. The household manual, Chase's book, Child's book, the dozens like them, had no lobby, no advertising campaign, no television spot. It just quietly went out of print, while something shinier took the shelf. The villain in this story isn't a shadowy conspiracy. It's something more ordinary and more powerful than that. It's convenience. It's the cultural authority of a branded bottle over a handwritten receipt. It's the fact that your grandfather trusted the label with the clinical typeface more than he trusted the jar with the penciled date. But grandmothers don't forget. They just stop being asked. And the recipe that Chase collected in Ann Arbor in 1864 is still sitting in the public record, digitized by the Library of Congress, free for anyone to read. Now here's where it gets interesting, because there's real chemistry behind why it worked. Here's what grandmothers were tapping into without ever knowing the names. Raw honey is not simply sweet. The glucose oxidase enzyme present in unprocessed honey reacts with tissue to produce hydrogen peroxide, a natural antimicrobial. Honey's low pH and extremely high sugar concentration create an environment that is genuinely inhospitable to bacterial growth. And that coating sensation, thick, warm, slow, is the honey doing exactly what it was designed by 10,000 years of beekeeping to do. Your great-grandmother didn't know the words glucose oxidase. She just knew the honey went in first. Garlic carries a compound called allicin, but here's the key that most people miss. Allicin doesn't exist in an intact garlic clove. It forms only when garlic is chopped or crushed and then exposed to air. The enzyme reaction that produces allicin takes approximately 10 minutes. That slightly medicinal, almost sharp note that comes off freshly cut garlic. That's the allicin forming in real time. Your great-grandmother didn't know the word allicin either. She just knew to chop it and wait before adding it to anything. An apple cider vinegar contributes acetic acid, the primary component, which has its own documented antimicrobial properties. More practically, the acid in the vinegar acts as a preservative, stabilizing the preparation and extending its shelf life through a winter season. The brightness you taste in it, that sharp, almost fruity cut through the sweetness, is the vinegar doing two jobs at once, working as an ingredient and working as a keeper. Together, the three form something more stable than any one of them alone. The honey coats and preserves. The vinegar acidifies and stabilizes. The garlic contributes allicin throughout. It is, in the language of 19th century pharmacology, a preparation, not a single ingredient remedy, a made thing. And in December 2007, a research team led by Dr. Ian Paul at Penn State College of Medicine published a study in the Archives of Pediatrics and Adolescent Medicine comparing buckwheat honey, a darker, antioxidant-rich variety, against dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in commercial cough suppressants for nighttime cough. Researchers found that honey outperformed dextromethorphan on every cough-related measure they tested: frequency, severity, and sleep quality. Honey consistently scored best. Dextromethorphan, the compound the Food and Drug Administration approved in 1958, and that has been in American medicine cabinets ever since, was not significantly better than no treatment at all. That's exactly what your great-grandmother would have done with that information. Nodded, set it aside, and gone back to the jar she already had on the shelf. Here is the preparation as Chase's contemporaries would have known it. I'm going to give you exact quantities because that's how these manuals worked. Not vague and approximate, but specific. Farmhouse medicine had to be reproducible. It had to work the same way every time, whether it was made in Kalamazoo or Sandusky or a stone farmhouse outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania. You'll need 1 cup of raw, unfiltered honey. Not the plastic bear, the unfiltered kind, still slightly cloudy, with visible particles in suspension. You'll need 8 to 10 cloves of fresh garlic, peeled and roughly chopped. And you'll need half a cup of raw apple cider vinegar, unfiltered, with the visible sediment, what they now call the mother, still intact. Peel and chop your garlic first, and then set it aside on the board and leave it for 10 minutes. This is the step most people skip, and it's the one that matters most. The enzyme reaction that produces allicin requires air and time. If you add the garlic directly into the jar without waiting, you are adding inert garlic. Wait the 10 minutes. Once the garlic has rested, add it to a clean glass jar. A half pint or pint mason jar, the kind Chase's contemporaries would have used for summer canning. Pour the half cup of apple cider vinegar over the garlic. Let that sit for 5 minutes. You're starting the acidification process before the honey goes in. Then add the cup of honey. Pour it slowly. You'll watch it settle through the vinegar. Amber moving through amber, the whole thing turning slightly murky and warm. There is a specific moment, about halfway through the pour, where the preparation looks exactly like something that belongs in a 19th century apothecary. That's because it does. Seal the jar, then turn it, not shake it, turn it. 3 full rotations to combine. That's how the old recipes described the motion. Then tuck a slip of paper with the date under the lid band and set it in the coolest corner of your pantry, away from the stove. By 24 hours, the garlic will have begun releasing its sharpness into the honey. By 48 hours, the honey will have taken on something savory underneath its sweetness. Warm, slightly vegetal, faintly medicinal. The smell, when you open it, is somewhere between a good kitchen and a very old pharmacy. Familiar and strange at the same time. Farmhouse pantries and root cellars kept temperatures low naturally. See, a properly acidified preparation like this, the vinegar does real preservation work, could sit through a winter season in a cool space. Chase's contemporaries would have taken a tablespoon of such a preparation stirred into warm water. The manuals were specific about proportion and restraint. They were also specific about one other thing, and this is what Chase's era was careful to note. Raw honey was not for infants. Strong preparations were not for the very young. The manuals were explicit about this. That caveat has not changed, and it belongs in any honest account of what these remedies were. Label it. Set it on the shelf. Wait for November. And that's exactly what your great-grandmother would have done. There is something almost archaeological about a recipe like this, and it has survived 400 years of translation. From Greek apothecary texts to European herbalists, to colonial settlers, to Ohio farm wives, to a man in a wagon writing everything down by lamplight. It survived the Civil War, 2 world wars, the pharmaceutical revolution, the fluorescent authority of the branded medicine aisle, and your grandmother's silence on the subject, because she stopped being asked. Outside your window right now, it's probably cold. Or it will be soon. The fog on the glass, the stove going, the smell in the kitchen that isn't medicine exactly, but isn't not medicine either. That smell is the smell of someone who knows something. The knowledge that lived in farmhouse pantries and household manuals was not primitive. It was not superstition. And it was practical, reproduced by millions of ordinary families across generations, tested not in a laboratory, but in exactly the crucible that matters most. A household where someone was sick and something had to be done before morning. It was crowded out not by something better, but by something louder. By advertising and consolidation, and the cultural authority of the printed label over the penciled receipt card. What we're doing here on this channel is not nostalgia, it's archaeology. We're going back into the record, into the digitized pages of Chase's book at the Library of Congress, into Lydia Maria Child's sickroom chapter, into the farmhouse manuals that went out of print quietly, while Robitussin went on television. And we're pulling out what was real, what was documented, what was used. And we're asking why it was ever set aside. If you want to keep digging through the old books with us, the manuals, the receipts, the farmhouse knowledge that didn't make it past 1950, subscribe. Because we've barely started. There are hundreds of these, and some of them are even more interesting than this one. Your grandmother knew things. We're just writing them down again.